Today, we're gonna give our e-waste gaming PC a GPU upgrade. Stay tuned. Boy, wouldn't it stink if it was slower? If you haven't seen the last video, I highly recommend watching that one first and then coming back and watching this one. I'll go ahead and tag that video here if you haven't seen it. We built this gaming PC with a budget of $200, and essentially it was out of e-waste. That's where it's got the nickname, the e-waste gaming PC. I think that's what I'm gonna call it from now on. And what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna follow upgrade paths that people would typically take with a computer that has specs as this one does. This system here is an AMD FX 4300. That's a quad core processor, and honestly, we're not going to be matching this thing up with a 3080 Ti. It would be a complete waste of money to put a modern graphics card in this computer. It would be completely CPU bound. The processor just could not handle what a modern graphics card would do. So for that, we're actually going to stick to the tradition of this computer, and we're going to go with some e-waste. And for that, we're going to use a 750 Ti. This is an EVGA for the Win 750 Ti that I picked up on eBay for about $100. Now these things here, you can pick these things up all day for around $100. And I've even seen some other For the Win cards on eBay. So if you want a card just like this, they're really easy to come by. And this one should perform a lot better than the 550 Ti that we started with. But to find out, we're gonna have to install it and see how it does. Now, to replace your graphics card, the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is to remove the old graphics card. So we're gonna get this 550 Ti out of here. And the way we do that is first, disconnect your PCI Express power from the card. Then we wanna remove the screws from the back of the case right here. We're gonna go ahead and pull those out real quick. This card here has 2 screws in it. A lot of modern graphics cards actually do have 2 screws. And then we want to reach around the back right here. This case, it's a little bit difficult to get to, but your case is probably a lot easier than this one, but I can still reach it if I put my hand in through the back here. But you want to hit the little clip that's on the back of the PCI Express slot. And when you hit that clip, you should be able to pull the card right out. Just like that. And then the new card should slide right into place. And again, this case is really tight, so getting this card in here, you just want to be really careful not to actually scratch or damage anything while you're putting the card in. So we're going to line it up with the PCI Express slot, and we should push it down and hear a snap. And then once it's snapped in place, we're going to go ahead and replace the screws in the back that hold the card in place. And then after that, make sure you replace your PCI Express power plug on it. And that's it. Now the first thing that you need to do once you get the graphics card installed is to install the driver. Now what I would recommend doing is downloading the latest driver for the graphics card you're installing beforehand and then unplugging your computer from the internet. This is to stop Microsoft from installing their generic driver in. You want to get NVIDIA's driver or ATI's driver depending on which graphics card you're installing. And the first thing I would recommend doing is running the program DDU. It stands for Display Driver Uninstaller. And this will actually strip out all the old drivers for your old card before you install your new ones. And to install the program, you do it just like this. Okay, so once you have DDU downloaded, you just go ahead and run the executable here. You want to run this program in safe mode. You could probably get away with running it in regular mode, but I would highly recommend running this in safe mode. And then what you're going to want to do is come over to the side right here where it says select device type, and we're going to pick GPU. It should automatically detect that you have NVIDIA drivers installed, so that's what it'll come up with. If it messes up though, you can always select your different manufacturer from right here, but we have NVIDIA, so we're going to stick with that. Now you have 2 different choices here. You can either click clean and don't restart, or you can click clean and restart. Now, if you haven't actually installed your graphics card yet, you can do this ahead of time before you install it by clicking clean and do not restart or clean and shut down. And if you do it that way, then you can actually have the drivers ripped out beforehand. But you know, honestly, it's really not necessary. I mean, there might be a rare circumstance where the old drivers are conflicting with the new ones, but you know, I've rarely ever seen that happen. Typically, you just want to remove them before you install the new driver. I'm going to go ahead and click on clean and restart because I've already replaced the graphics card, and once it's done, I want it just to boot into the regular mode of Windows. So we're going to click clean and restart, and it's going to start doing its thing. So once this finishes, it's going to automatically restart Windows if that's what you selected, and we'll be in regular mode, but we're going to be in regular Windows with no drivers at all. So once this thing finishes and we're back in Windows, I'll be back and show you how to install the new drivers. So now that we're booted back into Windows, as you can see, the resolution doesn't look that great right now. And that's because we have no drivers installed at all at the moment. And if you kept your internet unplugged like I suggested, Windows shouldn't try to install a driver for you. We want to do that ourselves. And if you downloaded that driver ahead of time, it should be sitting in your downloads folder waiting for you to install it. So we're going to do that right now. Okay, so we're going to pick our driver right here, and we're going to go ahead and double click on it. So it's going to take a minute for this driver to start, and honestly, that's because this system right here, you know, like we said at the beginning, this thing is built out of e-waste. So honestly, it's still running a spinning disk. If this thing was running an SSD, it would be much faster. And honestly, I think there's an SSD in this computer's future for sure. Okay, so what we're going to pick is, I'm just going to pick NVIDIA graphics driver without GeForce Experience, and then we're going to hit agree and continue. And then a lot of times I like to hit custom install because I want to see what they're actually installing. So go ahead and hit custom and hit next. And then this will show you what all is being installed. We don't need to perform a clean installation because we already ran DDU in order to strip out the old drivers, so that's not necessary. But right here, we can see it's installing the audio driver and the physics system software, as well as the graphics driver, and all this is fine. So once this driver is finished installing, you should just be able to restart your computer and get to gaming. And you know, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna see how this new GPU performs. Let's do it. So the first game we're gonna look at today, like with the old system, is Black Mesa. Just like before, this game is playing at all default settings. This is at 1920 by 1080, anti-aliasing is turned on, and it's running mostly high settings. We got an average FPS of 100.8 and a 1% low of 69.7. This game played a lot better on the 750 Ti than it did on the 550 Ti. I mean, the numbers don't lie here. We literally doubled our FPS. With the 550 Ti, we got 50.9 FPS compared to the average on the 750 Ti of 100.8. But you know, like I said in the last video, this is a very low resource intensive game, so I'm not surprised that we got such a big boost from the GPU upgrade. But this game is definitely even more playable on this system now than it was before. The next game we're going to look at today is CSGO. CSGO actually performed really well on this system even before the GPU upgrade. However, with the 750 Ti, we got 87.6 FPS with a 1% low of 42.6. As with the last system, this was also on mostly default settings. It was running at 1920 by 1080 with anti-aliasing turned on, and most of the settings were set to high. When we compare this to our old graphics card, the 550 Ti, you can see that we got 68.2 FPS average to the 87.6 that we got now. So, like before, I know people like to run CSGO at much higher frame rates than this. However, this is extremely playable. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't complain at all. I played through this several times on this system, and at 87 frames a second, this is actually very decent for this game. The next game we're going to look at is Grand Theft Auto 5. The first test that we did was exactly the same settings as we had on the last system. That's at 1280 by 720 with mostly normal settings and anti-aliasing turned off across the board. And for this, we got 80 FPS with a 1% low of 49.6. However, at these settings, this system was really CPU bound. I mean, the GPU never went over 50% on these settings. So what I did is I played around a little bit to see what we could do about increasing the settings, especially to make GTA actually look better. So what I did is in the second test, I went ahead and increased the texture settings to high, and we actually got 64.9 FPS average with a 41.21% low. However, we were still CPU bound. So honestly, I don't think the textures have anything to do with it here. So what I did is on the third test, I went ahead and jumped it up to 1080p, and that one kind of gave us an even CPU to GPU ratio here. And we ended up with 53.7 FPS average with a 1% low of 43.6, which honestly, the game looked so much better at these settings than it did on the old graphics card, the 550 Ti. And also, one of the other things I did for test number 3 was I went ahead and turned anti-aliasing back on in order to get those nice crispy lines. And honestly, the game looked really good and it was extremely playable and smooth. Clearly, GTA 5 is going to be limited on this system because it really uses the CPU hard. And honestly, I don't think there's a whole lot more that we can go with until we actually get a new CPU in this system in order to actually see better numbers than this. But these are actually pretty respectable. I mean, 53.7 average FPS definitely makes this game a playable game. For the next game we're looking at today, we're going to look at Cyberpunk 2077. And to be honest with you, I actually put this game into the benchmarks as more of a meme on this system than anything else. I did not think that it was going to perform at all. I went ahead and set this one to 1280 by 720. I set the preset to low, but I set the texture preset to high. And honestly, I was surprised to receive a 29.4 average FPS with a 20.91% low. Honestly, this game actually played a lot better on this system than I expected it to. Does it look good? No, not really. It doesn't look anywhere near as good as it can look. I mean, when you see this game playing on a system with an RTX card in it, it looks amazing. And honestly, on this system, it looks a little cartoonish, but for the most part though, it actually plays. And I bet you could play around with some of the settings. And like I said, I just did preset settings because I didn't think it was going to run that great at all. But if you were to spend some time and go through and actually dial these settings in, I bet you could easily get this thing over 30 frames a second, and it would actually be kind of enjoyable to play. So there you go. This system will run Cyberpunk. Kinda. The last game we're looking at today is Red Dead Redemption 2. This is another new game that I wanted to throw at this system to really kind of beat it up. I thought this game right here was actually going to pull it down really low because this system doesn't even match the minimum system requirements to be able to play this game. However, I was pleasantly surprised. I went ahead and tested this game at 1280 by 720, and I set the graphics presets right to favor performance, the highest setting in favor performance, and I'm using the Vulkan engine in order to render this game. And I got an average FPS of 40.9, and honestly that doesn't sound good, but considering the fact that this game right here doesn't even meet the minimum system requirements for this game, 40.9 is actually pretty good, and it had a 1% low of about 22 FPS. And you know, the game was a little bit jittery, and you can see that between the distance between the average FPS and the 1% low. And the GPU only sat at about 70% during this whole time. So honestly, I think this game right here is actually being CPU limited. I don't think the graphics card is what's limiting it. And honestly, with a higher end CPU, I think this game will actually run a lot better. In fact, I put the 750 Ti into my Ryzen 5 3600 and it completely got rid of the jitteriness and it actually raised the FPS up quite a bit. So this one here is definitely CPU limited. It's definitely CPU bound. However, it's really playable and the jitteriness isn't as noticeable as you might think, you know, especially since the majority of this game you're riding around on a horse. So the gameplay itself is kind of jittery if you think about it. The Heaven benchmark on this system ran way better than it did with the 550 Ti. We got an average FPS of 28.6. This gave us a score of 721. This is comparison to the score on the last system of 344. And keep in mind, the 550 Ti only got an average FPS of about 13.6. As before, the settings were exactly the same. It was set to the extreme preset, which put it as 1600 by 900 and turned all the settings all the way up to their highest. And honestly, I'm actually really happy with how this one came out. This one actually ran a lot better on this system than it did before. However, there's lots of room for improvement here. We could definitely get some upgrades to get this thing over 30 frames a second would be really nice, but we'll have to see what upgrades we do in the future to be able to get that goal. So as you can see, the system actually performed pretty good. That was a huge upgrade from the 550 Ti to the 750. And honestly, if you have a system that's similar to this one right here, you should see similar results if you do the same upgrade. And speaking of upgrades, this system's going to keep going through them. So if you have any recommendations on what you would do to this system, then please shout out in the comments and let me know. I might make a video about it. If this video was helpful to you, then please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And hit the bell icon so you can be notified of future videos. I post a new video every week. Oh, and hey, before you go, check out a couple of these videos. Have a great day.